Thank you, Shelby, appreciate it. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. You are here for the Contra Costa Continuum of Care Special NOFO Technical Assistance Workshop. It is very important that you remember this is the special NOFO. So I'm going to keep emphasizing special throughout this presentation because we also have a concurrently running regular NOFO. So just remember, special NOFO. Quick glance at our agenda. We're going to do a little bit of welcome. We're going to talk about what HUD COC program funding is and what the special NOFO is, how you can apply for that funding, and what you can use funding for, and next steps in this special NOFO process. So to kick us off, I'll start with some introductions. My name is Jamie Schechter. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the COC Director with Contra Costa Health Services, Health, Housing, and Homeless Services. We are the Continuum of Care collaborative applicant, so we are kind of the point of contact with the county for running this. And I will pass it over to Shelby.
Hi everybody, I'm Shelby Ferguson. I'm the COC Administrator for Contra Costa Health, Housing, and Homeless Services, or H3. Thanks, Jamie.
And during this process, we are very lucky to be working with some consultants from Focus Strategies. They are helping us with some technical assistance and providing some guidance to running this, again, concurrent notice of funding opportunity. So I'll pass it to Matt to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Matt Mitchell. I use he, him. I'm a senior analytics consultant with Focus Strategies, and I'm happy to be supporting this work.
And Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Finley, she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior consultant at Focus Strategies. Glad to join you all.
Great. And please feel free to put your introduction into the chat. We have just a short amount of time and a lot of information to cover, but we really appreciate everyone showing up here. So here are some just suggested group agreements for this meeting. Number one, keeping focus on the common goal of the workshop is to get everybody up to speed on what the special NOFO is and to understand the process in our community. To notice the power dynamics in the room. We know that there's new projects, big projects, lots of varying levels of comfort with HUD funding. So we're trying to make this as low barrier and easily accessible as possible. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to contact us through email if the public forum isn't your space. We really want to make this as accessible a process as possible. Ask questions as they come up, either in the chat box or you can unmute as comfortable and make sense. You can raise your hand. I'm trying to keep my eyeballs on the attendee screen, so I'm noticing people raising their hands. And then take breaks as you're needed. So take care of yourself, make sure you're comfortable throughout this meeting. And so unless there are any questions, I figure we can jump right in to an overview of the special NOFO. So just to give everybody a sense of the landscape, who was involved in this whole process? At the national level, we are talking about HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is the federal government agency that releases the COC, the Continuum of Care funding, and sets a lot of the rules that guide the way that we are distributing this funding. The COC is a couple of different things. In this context, it is the funding stream for permanent housing with services for people experiencing homelessness. And it also refers to our community system of care. So that broader group of stakeholders that are invested and involved in providing housing and services to folks who are experiencing homelessness. And NOFO. This is an acronym. We love acronyms in government. It is the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So this means that HUD has announced that they have funding available for people to provide services to people experiencing homelessness. This is the special NOFO, as I mentioned. Today, this is specifically related to the special NOFO. And locally, as I said, we've got some technical assistance and neutral facilitation support from our consultants Focus Strategies. And again, that's Matt and Vanessa. We've got our role here in Contra Costa Health Services and H3 as a collaborative applicant. That means we're the ones kind of coordinating and submitting the one big final package to HUD. And then we've got providers and other applicants and project applicants, and that's nonprofits in our community, as well as government entities or related government entities like schools and so on that can be eligible to apply. So an overview of the special NOFO. This is administered by HUD, as I said. It's for a 3-year grant. This is part of what makes this opportunity special. Generally, COC funds are released on a 1-year cycle, but because of this special NOFO, it is using recaptured funds. So throughout the years, COC projects have underspent or, for various reasons. And so HUD said, let me swoop back all that money and issue this new notice of funding opportunity to make a 3-year grant cycle using those recaptured funds to add a little bit more funding into communities to end homelessness. HUD released this special NOFO with an emphasis on rural and unsheltered homelessness. So rural homelessness, they had about a pool of $67 million, I believe, available specifically for rural communities. We do not qualify as a rural community, so we are not eligible to apply for that. Nationally, they released a pool of about 250 or so billion dollars. Million, sorry, numbers at this time of day. And that is for the specific emphasis on unsheltered homelessness. And so every continuum of care that is applying for this funding is applying for either unsheltered or rural, or in some places in the country, both. And then HUD will award those grants directly to individual applicants. And in our community, that means the providers and project applicants who are applying to this opportunity. The COC is not a pass-through entity. So nonprofits and other government entities work directly with HUD. So what goes into our application that goes to HUD? Well, first it's a COC application, and that is the body of work that the collaborative applicant puts together, talks about our plan for addressing unsheltered homelessness, and talks about kind of our community goals and efforts. Then there are the project applications. This is the thing that our providers and project applicants are responsible for putting together. You have to be submitting something in what's called eSNAPs. That is the system that HUD uses to accept applications. And then there's a priority listing. So folks who are familiar with this know that new projects are creating a narrative, and they are addressing various topics in that narrative that all go to a review and ranking panel within our community. That is a body of our Council on Homelessness. And they say, based on the scoring criteria, based on the answers provided, here's the ranking of all the projects that have been submitted. And this is how we think they stack up against each other. And all of that gets pushed together and submitted as a collaborative application to HUD. So how much funding is available? This is why I put the numbers on the screen, because I knew my brain would jumble them. So HUD released this NOFO competition to approximately 450 COCs across the country. 267 million of that was for unsheltered homelessness. And so Contra Costa of that amount is eligible to apply for a maximum over those 3 years of a little bit more than $5 million. And the COC, as the planning body, can apply for up to a 3% maximum in planning funds that help us, pay for staffing and running the competition and all those fun things that have those associated costs. So when you do the math, that works out to a little bit over $1 million per year in that 3-year grant cycle for the entire community. Okay, so that was a lot. Does anybody have any questions about what the special NOFO is and kind of that top level, high level view of the process? Julie, I see your hand raised.
Since these are recaptured dollars, do any of us anticipate, or is there an indication that this might be something which becomes renewable after the 3-year period?
That is a great question. And I think we are hopeful that that is a yes, but I don't know that HUD has committed that in stone. Vanessa, I saw you go off mute, feel free to jump in if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're correct. We are expecting these to be renewable dollars. HUD hasn't clarified the process through which they'll be renewed, but I think folks are expecting and hoping that eventually after this initial 3-year grant term that it would roll into the regular NOFO competition.
All right, any other questions before I jump right in? Okay. So moving right along, the meat and potatoes, how do you apply for this special NOFO? So these are some of the top kind of line questions to assess if you're ready to apply. Are you a nonprofit or a local government body? Do you have an active SAM.gov registration and a SAM.gov unique entity identifier? These are things that if you do not have them, jump on them right away if you want to apply this year, or if you anticipate applying in the future for HUD funding. They can take a little bit of time to get settled, and so as early as possible, if you're interested in pursuing HUD funding, then it's a good idea to get that set up. Do you have an applicant profile for your organization eSnaps? Again, this can take a little bit of time to learn the system and to set up. So definitely if you're thinking about applying for the special NOFO or any future HUD funding, go ahead and jump on that right away. Do you have a compliant code of conduct? And happy to share resources on what that kind of looks like. If you're new to HUD, there's plenty online, but just something to look through your policies and procedures and understand, is your code of conduct compliant with the regulations? And then do you have match commitment? So this is one of the largest barriers for smaller or new projects. HUD requires for most activities a 25% project match. So if you're applying for $100,000 from HUD, you need to be able to demonstrate non-federal match dollars of $25,000. And so this is going to be a really similar process with details that are different to the regular NOFO, though, to try and keep things as consistent as possible and in compliance with what HUD has determined we need to do. So applying for funding will require a local application. And like I said, that's essays, short answers, attachments, narratives to talk about the project you're proposing. It'll give us details on what the project looks like, the detailed budget, any site addresses if you're proposing, single site services, but that's the local application. I'll step back in a minute and just mention that HUD released this in a very fast and furious kind of way at the same time as our regular NOFO. So we're in a process of building the plane as we're flying it. So we will get more clarity to you all very shortly on what exactly those narrative responses and what that local application looks like. But you can look at our regular NOFO application materials and know that we are working to streamline and pare that down a little bit to account for the faster timeline that the special NOFO requires. But that can give you an idea of what kind of questions we'll be asking. And Adam, I see your message in the chat, going back to the match question. You can apply match in cash or in kind. I will highlight that in kind match, meaning if you've got services or other goods that you want to say equal the value of your cash match. That is harder to document, so it takes a little bit more planning, but not an unallowable way to document match at all. Okay, and then step 2 for applying is the national application or the project application that needs to go into eSnaps. So you need to be making sure that you have that eSnaps account. You've got your SAM.gov identifier. You've got your proof of nonprofit status or government status. But there's an applicant profile. There are some essay questions that can be similar, and HUD is a little bit more cut and dry. They don't necessarily need all the flowery language, but they want some narrative responses in there, as well as a couple of attachments like your code of conduct, etc. And then there's kind of the TA process that H3 and Focus will be supporting to make sure that new projects that are submitted are meeting all the compliance with HUD rules. So please feel free, if this is a process you want to pursue, to reach out to us and lean on us for the support. So To be very clear though, these are for new projects. That means that the projects don't yet exist in our COC funded universe, and they cannot be asking for dollars that would replace state or local funding. So if you've got money from MHSA, for example, that is paying for services, you need to be able to demonstrate that whatever funding you're applying for through this special NOFO is not replacing those, but is expanding or serving new people in that project. It would be asking for 3 years of funding to start the operation of the new project. And it's really very encouraged to leverage partnerships. So we'll dig into that a little bit more down the line. Just to recap again, different way of looking at it. Part 1 is that local competition where y'all are submitting those narratives and getting reviewed and ranked by our scoring panel. And part 2 is that national competition where we're submitting the collaborative application to HUD. HUD's deciding what to fund. In this competition, it's very important to note that HUD is awarding a maximum of 10 awards per state. So even if we put together a very, very good proposal and we have very strong projects, if there are 11 other communities or 10 other communities in the state that are serving just 1% better and HUD wants to award them, that could mean we do not get awarded funding in this process. But that doesn't mean that our projects aren't worthwhile to fund. So just wanted to note. HUD will really look at our priority listing and they'll really look at our application to look at how we are aligning with their priorities. So when we dig into the project types, I'll kind of highlight those things that line up with the priorities of the special NOFO so you can really assess whether your project will make a good impact here. Okay, so the application process, like I said, we are building the plane as we are flying it. So this week on Friday, our Continuum of Care Emergency Solutions Grant Committee of the Council on Homelessness, or COC ESG Committee, is meeting on Friday to confirm the scoring tool that we will be using for this special NOFO. And so that will really give you clarity on what the scoring panel, the review and rank panel, is looking for in your narrative responses and in your attachments to make a strong application. We'll also be providing kind of the format through which you'll be submitting those applications. So right now, we're thinking that's going to look like a Microsoft form, or it'll look like a Google form that you can just enter in your information online, and we'll be able to centralize that and share that out with y'all. So then after those projects are submitted, the review and rank panel applies the scoring criteria to the local applications to assess that ranking. For folks who are applying in the regular NOFO, you'll know that process is happening right now for the regular NOFO, and it'll take a very similar process for the special NOFO. The priority listing, that is going to be a thing we keep highlighting. It is very important to HUD to see how we're ranking our projects and how they align with their priorities. So some requirements of all COC projects. There must be participation in coordinated entry. So this is a way that HUD has determined all of our projects must function. That means they must participate in our system where assessment is happening and where we are coordinating the resources in our community and allocating them according to standardized criteria. They must be housing first. That means your project agrees that housing is the first solution to homelessness and does not require participation in services or other sorts of barriers that would prevent people from accessing the program. There must be usage of our Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS system. This is the database through which all COC projects are tracked. And there's different levels of data entry burden, depending on what project type you're taking, but it is a requirement for all projects to participate. There's got to be some pretty firm record keeping. So when you're assessing if folks are eligible for your program, when you are creating your policies and procedures and making sure that your housing is up to standard, that has to be very well documented. It has to be organized because HUD does audit, HUD does monitor. And so making sure that you can demonstrate all the requirements are being met is very, very important. And again, the match costs for the program, generally a 25% match must be very well demonstrated as well. So making sure that if you're using in-kind match, your methodology is very firm and you're very adept at tracking and documenting how that match is being calculated. Cash match from some federal programs, generally not a lot of them, can be used from California programs like CalWorks or HEAP or HAP, if you've got any of those dollars left. And of course, private fundraising dollars can be used as cash match. I'm going to take another pause and see if there are any questions from what I've covered so far. Okay. So then what can we use funding for? So permanent supportive housing. First and foremost, this is housing that has a permanent subsidy and long-term case management attached to it. Dedication to chronically homeless households is a preference, but not a requirement in this special NOFO. So that is a big difference from the regular NOFO. In regular NOFO, that is a requirement to serve 100% chronically homeless households. But in special NOFO, HUD gave us a little bit more flexibility on that. Rapid rehousing or joint transitional rapid rehousing programs are also an allowable project type. And so these households must be under the category 1 or 4 homeless definition that HUD sets forward. So that means they must be literally experiencing homelessness or fleeing domestic violence or trafficking to be eligible for this program. And this has a time-limited housing subsidy that's paired with case management. So over time, rapid rehousing subsidy tapers off, permanent supportive housing subsidy remains the same. In the special NOFO, this is the emphasis on leveraging partnerships. Projects must leverage housing or healthcare resources. So the COC in our collaborative application will be awarded points if we have projects that have 50% or more COC funded housing subsidies or leverage housing resources at a 50% or more match level. And so that could be, you know, you've got a building that has 10 units and you want 5 of them to be supported with COC dollars, but you know 5 of them are already being taken care of by housing choice vouchers. That would be a great example of a project that could be eligible here. These funds cannot fund construction, rehabilitation, or acquisition costs. So if you have a great building you want to buy, that might be a good idea to go look at our home key, our California home key application, but it cannot be funded through the COC competition. Oh, so here we go. So yes, so just to recap, what makes a high scoring housing project will be those projects that have 50% or more non-COC funded housing subsidies. So mixed kind of subsidy building or project, scattered site project, or projects that can demonstrate a 50% match from a healthcare provider or provision of substance use treatment services to all qualified participants who chose those services. So again, these are very important, very key to demonstrate partnerships in our community. And again, can't fund those ineligible costs. HUD will shoot that application right back to us and say, nope, not here. What's also really exciting about this special NOFO though is this next category. So the support services only category is generally not a project type HUD likes to fund. But in this special NOFO that is focused on unsheltered homelessness, they've said this is an allowable project type. And so you can put forward projects that don't have a permanent housing or rapid rehousing component, but might do things like street outreach or provide standalone services like housing navigation or childcare services to people who are fitting that category 1 or 4 homeless definition. And so again, that is people who are literally experiencing homelessness or people who are fleeing domestic violence or trafficking situations. So that's very exciting. This is a new opportunity in our community. And I put here in kind of this grayed out, harder to see box that HUD is also funding coordinated entry and HMIS projects. These are projects that only H3 is eligible to apply for as the collaborative applicant and the HMIS lead. So for most folks in this room, that's not an applicable project type, but it is a recognition from HUD that more projects mean more kind of architecture and structural needs, like expanding our HMIS and making sure that we've got coordinated entry beefed up to support all of that. And Jamie, no, to answer your question, CES and HMI.S dollars are not considered part of the planning money. So earlier in the presentation, I mentioned the COC planning has a set aside of a maximum of 3%. HMIS and coordinated entry dollars are on top of that. And so what makes a high scoring support services only project? Would someone have a question to ask? Okay. A support services only project that has a plan to ensure connection to mainstream benefits. This is going to be a very strong component of your application. And there must be a strategy to provide services to those with the highest service needs. So HUD, again, really making sure that we're targeting unsheltered folks, folks with complex needs, healthcare and housing, will really make that strong support services only project. Any question about project type before I get into that timeline? Okay. So here's the timeline. This is pretty baked, pretty well ready to go, but there might be some flexibility because, like I said, things are happening very fast and furious with this competition. Today, we're doing the special NOFO TA workshop. However, if you hear from colleagues or other folks in the community who are like, darn, this was just too short notice, I couldn't make it, please let them know that we are happy to have some one-on-one TA review this material with them separately. And we really want to make sure that this is an open process for a lot of folks. This Friday, like I said, our COC ESG committee is going to discuss the scoring tool and hopefully approve it. Our goal then is to post the application materials. These will be draft materials, so they will have that big draft watermark, but after the COC ESG committee approves it, they're going to be pretty firmed up. In order to get them finalized and finally approved or formally approved, we'll be presenting it on the 15th to the Council on Homelessness meeting. And we will be seeking approval for a review and rank panel there from our council members. You know, it's a very, very quick turnaround. The local project applications are going to be due September 20th. This is a hard deadline from HUD. This cannot be changed. And so we recognize that's a very, very tight turnaround. And so I would encourage folks who are interested in pursuing this, that after we post those draft materials, you use those to work on your application. We wouldn't anticipate posting anything that would require a major overhaul by the council, but we don't want people to think they only have 5 days to create an application. We're working, like I said, to really streamline it and make it as easy as possible because we know that this is very quick turnaround and we know that y'all have a lot on your plate during this time of year. So again, really highlighting September 20th, hard deadline. We are aiming to convene the review and rank panel on the 27th. So giving our panelists a week or so to review the applications, which can be quite time consuming. So it's a big ask of our panel. But to convene them for a day where we create that priority listing to include in our application. We will post that priority ranking and we will give folks a day. And again, I apologize for this tight turnaround. It is quick, but we will give folks a day to appeal any decisions that they think might not be quite right. We will then convene an appeals panel if there are any appeals received and give them 2 days, and again, tight turnaround, to discuss the appeals, to convene and have any changes made before the final priority listing is posted on September 30th. This again is also a pretty hard deadline because we need to be able to present the final priority listing to the Council on Homelessness on October 6th and get their stamp of approval and make sure that we put that posted in advance of that meeting. So there's a time for public review. And then on the 20th of October, again, another hard deadline, all of the consolidated application materials are due to HUD. And so this is, if we don't kind of meet some of these hard deadlines, this will really impact our ability to submit on time. So Again, I will say it over and over, apologies for the tight turnaround, but this is a pretty quick process for us. Are there any questions folks have about this timeline? And so questions, there's plenty of time for us to have question and answer time here in this meeting, but I'll flag that we're asking you to send questions to the Contra Costa COC at cchealth.org email address with the word special NOFO in the subject line so we can flag them and respond quickly. For folks who are used to participating in the regular NOFO competition, I want to make sure I'm very clear that the Contra Costa TA email address for Homebase is not the place to be sending questions about the special NOFO. Homebase's regular NOFO questions, H3 is going to be that special NOFO question. So just to be very clear, they'll redirect you to us anyways. If you make a mistake, not the end of the world, but let's not clutter up their inbox because they are working fast and furiously on the regular NOFO. So I have a lot of material. This will be posted on our website, but I will open up the space and answer any questions that might be cropping up right now.
Jamie, I had one question. Will next steps, will that communication go out via email?
Yeah, we can send a blast to the email, same that we did with the public solicitation, so it should come from a Contra Costa COC email address.
Perfect, thanks.
And thank you, Shelby, for putting our email address in the chat.
Jamie, I just wondered, is there a priority list of project types that Contra Costa County would prefer?
So I will say that HUD will be awarding those points to those projects that can demonstrate, housing projects that can demonstrate that 50%, non-federal or non-COC housing subsidies match or 50% healthcare services leverage. So that'll help us as a collaborative applicant. And then the scoring tool draft that is posted for our committee meeting on Friday could give you some good insight onto how we're thinking prioritization will happen. But again, those are still drafts and that committee hasn't yet met. And I do want to emphasize that small projects, new projects, you don't have to go at it alone. If you have an experienced partner in the community that has done this before, you're welcome to apply together. MOUs are, welcome and able to be uploaded as part of the demonstration. HUD can be intimidating as a funding source, but we are really invested in making sure that we get a more diverse, larger provider network. Okay, I'm going to do a quick temperature check since I'm not seeing very many questions. Using the raise your hand feature, would folks be willing to give me a demonstration on how many folks are interested in pursuing this special NOFO project application? Okay, let's see a couple. Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. All right, I'll encourage you to put your hands down unless you have a question that you want to ask.
Jamie, can I mention one more thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one other thing to kind of just be aware of for anybody who's interested in applying for these dollars. One of the things that the COC has to put together for this, that full consolidated application is a COC plan really to address unsheltered homelessness. And so that plan will in part be pulling from a lot of the work that the COC has already done to identify strategies to, provide access to shelter, provide access to housing, coordinate outreach, those types of activities. So all of the strategies and the information should look very familiar to folks. But one of the questions in the application does ask how your project will support the COC's efforts to address unsheltered homelessness as they're outlined in the plan. And so there will be a draft of that plan that will also be released to the community a few days before those applications are due. So do keep your eye out for that and be thinking about really these project applications, again, how they contribute to the COC's efforts to address unsheltered homelessness in particular.
So I do actually have one quick question. So I work over at a mental health clinic. I'm the office manager and an AMFT over at Lock and Cordia Psychotherapy and Wellness Clinic. And we are interested in applying for this, but I'm trying to formulate in my head like how we would go about this one. Because we do agree that housing first is like, that housing is definitely the first way to go, but we are a trauma site. We specialize in trauma therapy. We were thinking like DV groups and things like that. In terms of the healthcare part, would we be able to navigate that route in terms of giving supportive services, like giving therapy or like groups and things like that?
Absolutely. So let me see if my response clarifies the question. So as a healthcare facility that's providing therapy and whatnot, you can definitely use those services as an in-kind match to whatever project you're proposing. So if you're proposing to do a housing component or additional support services, you can use the non-funded services that you provide to people in your program who are meeting those eligibility criteria as a match.
Okay, so we do need to have that housing component, it seems.
You could apply for a services only program, or you could apply with a partner who is offering housing. But there would just need to be a match of non-continuum of care funded services to leverage against the ones you're applying for.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Jamie, I have a question. This is Adam. Are there any, to Joanne's question there, are there any sort of matchmaking suggestions on, say, your service provider needing to talk to a housing person or a housing person needing to talk to a service provider? Do you have any thoughts on how we could connect in different ways?
That's a great question. So I know Housing Authority works with many of the providers in our community. So if you have an established relationship with them, that you are already partnering on certain programs, they might be a good provider to offer that housing match. I know a lot of nonprofit developers have and regular developers have sort of affordable housing, homeless housing criteria that they build into their projects. And if some of those units are floating around the community, or Shelter Inc., I'll throw you under the bus a little bit, you all offer some master leasing scattered site programs. If a healthcare partnership would help build a strong application, that might be a partnership worth reaching out to. So I would recommend taking a look at some of our providers that are listed on our website and seeing if there are relationships or projects that that they are working towards. That might be a good place to plug in.
Thank you.
So, but those would need 25% match from other sources. So even if two providers got together to collaborate on a project of sheltering and mental health, we still have to come up with a 25% match.
Correct. But let me repeat it back just in case I'm getting it wrong. For a housing project, for example, if you've got vouchers through Housing Choice Vouchers or some other source, and you apply for additional vouchers to expand that, you could build in supportive services dollars, and your housing vouchers that are non-COC funded could serve as that match. And Vanessa and Matt, please correct me if I'm getting those details incorrect.
No, I think as you explained it, it's correct. Really, it's the and this just might be part of the conversation as you are trying to forge those partnerships as far as, you know, what do we really need to ask for the funding request for? What can serve as match or leverage, depending on if you're talking about those healthcare or housing services.
And Medi-Cal billing was a match source on this?
It can be, and I can definitely connect you to Juliana, who's H3's kind of ops person and probably better versed in the details of Medi-Cal match criteria. I know there's some nuance to it. Oh, and I think I dropped off my resources slide. I'll be sure to, there we go. I think I skipped over this one, sorry. I'll just kind of point you back to some resources that we have listed on our website. And again, this whole presentation will be hosted on our website, and we will be sure to send out an email blast after this so you have access to these things. But we've got all the tools and policies and procedures that you might need to look through to be familiar with how our COC runs in Contra Costa County. You can look at the regular NOFO materials to get an idea of what might be in the special NOFO. But again, we're really working to streamline and make sure that it's a little bit less of a lift because of that really quick timeline. And then there's the special NOFO full announcement on the HUD website. If you need some good bedtime reading, that'll do it for you. But it gives you all the details of what project activities are. It references all the statutes for compliance, and you'll be really well versed in HUD funding if you get through that one. And then I included a link to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They posted a very great webinar that gives the full overview of the special NOFO. And they have a couple one-pagers, and some of it won't be relevant to folks in this room because it'll speak to the collaborative application that H3 will be submitting. But it does give some good details and answer some of those questions that have surfaced here today. So I'm happy to stay on for a little bit longer, but I think we got a lot of the questions out here. So I'm also equally happy to give everyone 15 minutes back of their day. Or longer than that, huh? I'm giving a little bit more.
Thanks, Jamie. Everything was really clear. I appreciate it.
Great.